Good evening. Due to technical issues, this episode is being aired as a rebroadcast because we were having issues with Restream. So if you have any questions based on tonight's presentation, or you have any questions about Relapse, which is tonight's topic, please don't hesitate to email me at theventureforward@gmail.com. Once again, theventureforward@gmail.com. Some disclaimers, as we normally do. Before we start tonight's program, this is a reminder that this episode will address various topics related to addiction, amongst other things. And we'll have a reminder about multiple sclerosis. These may be sensitive to some of our viewers. Viewer discretion, as always, is advised. We remind you to please consult your doctor, your mental health professional, your outreach group, your sponsor, or specialist before adopting any change to your dietary, physical, and/or mental health regime. If you're looking for options with respect to mental health, contact SAMHSA. That is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration at 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-4357. The service is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And it's a confidential, free information service for individuals and family members facing such stressors. Importantly, if you're feeling suicidal crisis or emotional distress and need to be put in touch with a crisis center, call or text the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 988. Once again, 988. Or go to 988lifeline.org. These resources are also available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You're not alone, and you don't have to go through this alone. You are worth it. Something we don't normally talk about but is worth conversation tonight is in that of gambling. If you're looking for options with respect to compulsive gambling, please contact either the National Council on Problem Gambling hotline at 1-800-522-4700, again 1-800-522-4700, or go to the National Council on Problem Gambling's website at ncpgambling.org. You can also call 1-800-GAMBLER. That's again 1-800-GAMBLER. Bet with your head and not over it. And lastly, I'd be remiss not to talk about the thing that has been paramount in my mind over the last 2 years, and that of multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis is a disorder that is often disabling various parts of your brain and your central nervous system. I would say very much unpredictable. And where the lesions are, it basically can affect various parts of your body. It could affect your vision. It could affect your motor skills. It could affect your hearing. It could affect a lot of different parts of your body. And depending on where the lesions of the demyelination take place, that is how multiple sclerosis affects people that are affected by it. It is basically the flow of information between the brain and the body. And it is a study of science that we are learning more and more about each and every day. Neurologists and neuroscientists around this country, around the world, have made such incredible headways with respect to multiple sclerosis research and demyelination. Hoping at one point in our lives that remyelination will definitely be an option for those that have had plenty of demyelination and have had multiple sclerosis. One of the organizations that are there to help is the National MS Society. They are the largest private funder of MS researchers in the world. They invest more than $1 billion to date. MS stops people from moving, but the National MS Society exists to make sure that MS doesn't. To contact the National MS Society, please call 1-800-344-4867. Once again, 1-800-344-4867. Or go to their website at nationalmssociety.org. Thank you to all of you who have gone to National MS Society to learn more about demyelination and multiple sclerosis. It touches me and over to 1 million people in this country who have multiple sclerosis in so many ways. And we appreciate all of you. And on that, let's begin. Good evening, and welcome to the Venture Forward. I am John Venturini, a recovering addict of overeating, obesity, alcoholism, and compulsive gambling. And it's an honor and pleasure to see all of you tonight on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter, although we have been pre-recorded. And I'll drop a quick comment about that. But because we're pre-recorded, there won't be any live chat tonight. So if you have any questions about tonight's talk, please drop me a line at theventureforward@gmail.com. Once again, theventureforward@gmail.com. I'm going to be honest with you for a second. This is going to feel a little weird. It's going to feel weird because usually when we do these episodes, there's that live interaction between all of you and between me, and I'm bringing comments on screen. But tonight, it's just me, myself, and I. And given the story that I'm about to tell this evening, maybe it's better that way. It's been a very interesting month. A month that some of you know about, and a month that some of you don't know about. We know about the marathon. You can see the medal behind my back there, which was an amazing portion of this story. I ran my first marathon back almost a week and a half ago now. Yeah, it's actually a week and a half ago. My first ever marathon. Did I run through it blazingly? No, I had problems with my legs, cramps all over the place, Charlie horses, and a major foot cramp on my right foot and a shoulder cramp. And if it wasn't for an aid station that gave me basically gels that had sodium and electrolytes in it, as well as 2 Tylenol, I don't think I would have been able to make it, but I did. And it's also talk about the community of running around you, and the fact that there were 6 to 7 runners that were having a hard time of things as well on an 85-degree and humid day in Portland. Oh man, it was hot, and it's totally unexpected. You know, you think of early October in Portland, you think, well, 65 degrees, 60 degrees, you think that's something you can run in. 85 and humid, oh man, that was rough. But nevertheless, I digress, and we'll talk more about that on VF Talks tomorrow night. But let's talk about Relapse. And we talked about Relapse earlier in the year in season 4. This, by the way, technically is the season premiere for season 5. 5.1, October 13th, 2022, Relapses and how to work through them. And the reason why we're talking about that tonight, I'll get to before the end of this show. But it is something that within the last month or so, it became very prevalent in my life, in the sense that I know a couple of people in my life that have been dealing with relapse. And I know that there has been a portion of my addictions that came out to the woodwork as well in early September. But we'll talk about that in about 10 to 15 minutes. But before we begin, we will do what we normally do, in the sense that we're going to talk about the language of letting go. Because I think the language of letting go for today, and also for earlier this week, has a very poignant story that can be good for all of us. In the sense that tonight's language of letting go has something to do with substance over form. It goes something like this. Quote, I'm learning that for a variety of reasons, I spent much of my life focusing on form rather than substance. My focus has been on having my hair done perfectly, wearing the right clothes, having my makeup applied perfectly, living in the right place, furnishing it with the right furniture, working at the right job, and having the right man. Form rather than function has controlled my behavior in many areas of my life. Now I'm getting used to the truth, or finally getting to the truth, rather. It's substance that counts, unquote. That's from Anonymous. There is nothing wrong in wanting to look our best. Whether we are striving to create a self, a relationship, or a life, we need to have some solid ideas about what we want that to look like. Form gives us a place to begin, but for many of us, form has been a substitute for substance. We may have focused on form to compensate for feeling afraid or feeling inferior. We may have focused on form because we didn't know how to focus on substance. Form is the outline. Substance is what fills it in. We fill in the outline of ourselves by being authentic. We fill in the outline of our life by showing up for life and participating to the best of our ability. Now, in recovery, we're learning to pay attention for how things work and feel, not just to what they look like. Today, I will focus on substance in my life. I will fill in the lines of myself with a real person, me. I will concentrate on the substance of my relationships rather than what they look like. I will focus on the real working of my life instead of the trappings. And that is the language of letting go. And if you think about tonight's topic, that is very poignant. It is extremely poignant because you think about what we deal with in relapse, what we deal with when trying to overcome our addictions. It really does become a question of substance and form. And in a way, if you think about it, codependency, which is what the language of letting go is about. It's about codependency. So there's a lot of good things that were in that passage that I think one way or another, it's going to come up for various reasons. I think with respect to what we mean by relapse, I think we need to talk about 4 different terms: a slip, a lapse, a relapse, and a prolapse. More times than not, you'll hear those 4 terms, but more times than not, it is a relapse. And let's talk about exactly what those differences are. A minor event in battling one's addiction that can be deemed accidental in nature is a slip. You know, you have that accidental drink, you didn't realize it had alcohol in it, you had a slip. That is a true slip. You didn't realize it was a small sip, and you were done with it. That's a slip. The initial transgression of problem behavior after a quit attempt is defined as a lapse. The initial transgression, just a short transgression, initial, which could eventually lead to continued transgressions to a level that is similar to before quitting. And at that point, that's a relapse. If the behavior that you're going through is indicative of behavior or feelings or dopamine drip, for lack of better terms, that you're feeling before going to recovery, before going to sobriety, then you have a relapse. Another possible outcome of a lapse is that the client may manage to abstain and thus continue to go forward in the path of positive change. That would be prolapse. Prolapse is a very tricky concept, but there's a lot of theory and research on how prolapse can occur. For the sake of this particular episode, we won't talk about prolapse, but at some point we will talk about prolapse because that is very much an important part of recovery. So slip, try to get myself on camera, slip, lapse, relapse, and prolapse. Those are 4 terms. What happened on September 10th was a relapse. As you may or may not know, as we've talked about on the show many times, the 3 addictions that I tried to get over is my overeating, obesity, my alcoholism, and my compulsive gambling. The overeating, obesity, I've been tackling through diet, exercise, activity, also mental health work. You know, talking to a therapist, talking to basically groups about my overeating, working it through that angle. The same could be said about my alcoholism. My alcoholism was basically not necessarily treated, but basically worked through on a day-by-day basis by working of the steps and working through my sponsor and working through meditation and working through journaling, but being very open and honest with myself. And that took a lot of work, without question. I will also say, though, that the 3rd addiction is that of compulsive gambling. I would say that compulsive gambling is probably the toughest of the 3. And you may have arguments about that. It's like, well, it seems like diet and obesity would be the toughest because you were 300 plus pounds obese. And you'd be very right about that. But there would be also the argument about alcoholism in the sense that, well, it'd be very hard to break the concept of wanting to drink. And between all of that, yes, that would be very much a real thing, especially when you've learned that behavior through other people that have been in your life. You are basically the product of the company that you keep. You are the product of the environment that you keep. If you put yourself in environments that basically trigger you to do these behaviors, you're not putting yourself in a good place. The last one's compulsive gambling. And as we talked about on the show before, compulsive gambling has become a major problem in this country and around the world. When you're looking at the ability to gamble online, at the ability to basically place a wager on a game online, when ESPN of all networks are showing betting lines on a baseball game, and when you can get that information on the nightly news of all places, your local news and whatnot, it tells you that we've become very gambling friendly in this country. When you're inundated with commercials for online casinos left, right, and sideways, when you're continuously getting Facebook ads for online casinos, when you're getting emails about online casinos, it's very, very easy to try to say, I'm going to push this off to the side. It's going straight to spam, yada, yada, yada. But then you go through a situation where you are at basically your wit's end. You're at the bottom of your recovery plan or your relapse plan, and you feel helpless. And you're looking for that dopamine drip because you're going through so many things right now and you don't know how to handle it. You don't know how to take it. So you get that one advertisement and you say to yourself, oh, well, it's free money. I know if I go to this site, I'm not dropping $1 of my money. That's not true. September 10th, I ended up dropping $100, which is, in the grand scheme of things, the amount of money I've gambled in my entire life, $100 is a drop in the bucket. However, that $100 was being played for about 2 days. And yeah, the same behaviors came back. That $100 became a lot more. And yet there was no satiation because there were bonus limits that had to be met and whatnot. It was despicable behavior, but yet I didn't pull myself back from it because I was so triggered. I was so sick. And I needed to work my relapse plan. So I went through the motions, and 2 days later, I said, that's it. And through the work of my sponsor, through the work of a couple of mental health professionals, I worked through a plan to start going through it. It is a relapse. For no sugarcoating it. It is a relapse. But 40 to 60% of anybody who's in recovery, this is according to Hazel and Betty Ford, goes through relapse at some point. In the first year, that number is dramatically higher. That number is 80 to 90% within the first year. But after the first year, you're still looking at a 40 to 60% chance of a relapse. I'm very thankful that with respect to the diet and the exercise, I have not had a relapse. I've had moments of higher eating than some, but I've been working out, I've been exercising, I've been tracking everything for a very long time. If you go to the board, we're talking about 1,335 days of the diet. And we're talking about the sobriety, we're talking about 1,232 days. But when it comes to the compulsive gambling, I have to change the moniker of how I treat that now because I had a relapse. So there was 881 days of sober behavior prior to a relapse. I'm glad to say that there have been 31 days past that. So on the board, you'll always see a number now that says 881 plus a number. In this case, it's 881 plus 31. I have to remember that in recovery, relapse happens 40 to 60% of the time. And it's those people that don't get back to their program, that don't get back to fixing what has ailed them in the past. That is when you have a problem. I'm glad to say that I've been working my relapse plan. I'm glad to say that I am so far removed from what happened 3 to 4 weeks ago. I put myself on disqualification lists in Pennsylvania to make sure that doesn't happen again. I made sure that there are no mechanisms that if I get that email, it goes straight to spam. I don't see it. I made sure I go to my Facebook settings to make sure that I don't even get that popping up in my Facebook. As far as it being broadcast on TV, I'm glad to say I don't have much of a TV subscription right now. I don't belong to YouTube TV. I don't belong to Hulu, so I don't see it much. I'll see it if I go out to a restaurant. I'll see it if I go out to the gym. But that's just broadcast television and cable. That just happens. But I think for the fact that it's not in my home, I'm very much thankful. I'm working a plan to get myself removed from that environment. And at due time, I'll be okay with it. I'll be okay with what's going on. But I had a lot of things pressed up against me. And when you get triggered, beyond trigger, that may happen. And it happened. But I'm thankful that I was able to curtail it and cut it really quickly. And I'm thankful that it didn't grow to anything else. I'm glad it didn't grow back to alcohol. I'm glad it didn't go back to overeating, closet eating, and whatnot. I'm glad I kept it to just what that was, a 2-day relapse of compulsive gambling. Can we talk about the events that took place underneath? Yeah, I twisted my knee on a downhill run. I was feeling down. I wasn't sure if I was able to run a marathon. I was worried about that. But that's one of many different things that happened that just pushed me to a point. Nevertheless, I got pushed to a point. I worked through it, and I'm better now. And I did run that marathon. We'll talk about that tomorrow night on VF Talks, because I can't believe I did it. I cannot believe I ran a marathon, but yet there I did. Let's go back to a couple of slides that are worth noting here. Slips are common, according to the National Institute of Health. Addiction is conceptualized as a chronic relapsing brain disorder. The researchers Miller and Hester reviewed more than 500 alcoholism outcome studies and reported that more than 75% of subjects relapsed within 1 year of treatment. Now, this is an older slide. I saw numbers that have it more at 80 to 90%, but 75% is in the ballpark for sure. Another set of researchers, Hunt and colleagues, demonstrated that nicotine, heroin, and alcohol produced highly similar rates of relapse over a 1 year period in the range of 80 to 95%. A significant portion of patients, 40 to 80%, receiving treatment for alcoholic use disorders, try saying that 5 times fast, have at least one drink, a lapse, within the first year of after treatment, whereas about 20% of patients return to pre-treatment levels of alcohol use. So the thought is that, if you keep on working the program, there is a strong chance that you'll get back to sobriety, but you have to remain true to the program. That's why when we talk about relapse prevention, it's a strategy for reducing the likelihood and severity of relapse following the cessation or reduction of problematic behavior. That's not only true for alcoholism. That's true for narcotics. That's true for gambling. That's true for overeating. It's true for a lot of the addictions we've talked about on this show. Let's go back to Maine for a second. It's something that, you have to be very aware of. It's like relapses might happen. But when they do, the best thing you can do is you get back on the horse. You get back one foot in front of the other, and you do the best thing you can for you. Without question, that's the best thing you can do. So what does a relapse prevention plan look like? It talks about 4 different components here. You think the first thing is, what things do you like to do? What skills do you like to take part in that keep your mind away from the addiction? So in my case, what was I thinking about that kept me away from the gambling? And yes, working out and trying to get some movement and trying to get my knees to feel better and all of that was part of it. But reading and journaling and getting back to myself. I think there were so many things I kept on throwing in front of me that I lost my sense of self for a while. So it required me taking steps back and solidifying that first and foremost. But secondly, just being very cognizant of what's going on. The next question would be, who are the 3 people you can talk to if you're thinking about partaking in using? And simply that is my therapist, my sponsor, and a dear friend of mine. I think the 3 of them really helped me through this. The other person I'll mention is Allison Hope, who is an energy healer, who definitely worked a different way of how one would look at this, in a sense that she is basically a hypnotherapist. And there was regression therapy I did with her that went back and see where the sort of problem may be. We could talk about dopamine loving John. We could talk about 6-year-old John. We could talk about all of that. But working through that and having that sort of hypnotherapy was very important. We've talked about internal family systems, but there are obviously other methods of therapy out there that can certainly help. That hypnotherapy, energy healing that I did with Allison was incredible. And at some point, I hope to have her on the show. She is an incredible talent and has a lot of things to say about the mind-body connection, which we're going to talk a lot more about this season. The next question would be, what are the consequences of partaking in using? When you're knee-deep in the dopamine drip, it's very hard to see that. But what is the outcome of lapse, relapse? What is the outcome of sobriety? I think when you're gambling a small amount of money, you're not looking at how bad it is. But then when you look at how that $100 kept on going and going and going, and you kept on feeling that dazed and confused look on your face as you kept on playing and playing and playing, much akin to the feeling that you felt when you were gambling big time, when you're sitting in the middle of a high limit room at a very poor casino around the corner. When you get that feeling back, that is indicative that the behavior was back. It is a relapse. The things that you need to know full well is that craving does not end up passing. Distracting and moving to safer ground is key. You got to remove yourself from the environment that is causing you to feel the way that you're feeling. Complacency definitely does not work here. And you have to avoid the situations that put you at these risks. In my case, as I mentioned, putting yourself on disqualification lists within the state to make sure that you're not even able to play again is very important. But also making sure that you're not being triggered or not seeing a lot of that around you is very much part of what you need to do to work yourself through it. The last point on that bullet is important, and I mentioned this back in April, and I'm going to mention it again, and I have to remember this myself. But relapse is not a failure. Falling back due to a slip to lapse to relapse only makes the situation worse. But it's not a failure. It's not a failure if you end up healthier and moving forward from it. So in other words, if you have a relapse, the fact that you're back on the horse, the fact that you're doing the right things for you again, and you identified the reasons why you fell off the horse, that's part of recovery. You're doing the right thing. So, relapse is not a failure. It's a lesson, and it's our ability to learn from the lesson through our journaling, through our sponsor, through our sessions, through our meetings that make us grow. So relapse is definitely not a failure. I'm going to go back to Maine for a second. Did I feel horrible when it happened? Absolutely. But I think the thing I have to realize is relapse does happen. Do we want it to happen? Absolutely not. Am I thankful I was able to find a very short window and realize it and stop it in its tracks? Yeah. Was I thankful that I got the help I needed to work through it? Absolutely. But that's part of it, is being able to find it. But then the fact that you found it and you're back on, I would dare say makes it stronger than it was before, provided that you've cleaned up your environment not to have those triggers go off again. Which leads me to my next point. How do you avoid the slip in the first place? Well, you get a sponsor. In my case, I have multiple sponsors for my multiple addictions. They're very important. They've been very much a cornerstone for how I got through all these things. Attending meetings regularly, whether it is your anonymous meetings or smart recovery or your generalized addiction groups, meetings are very important. Meeting makers make it. It is a very important adage, and it's very true. Meeting makers absolutely make it. Speak with other program members regularly, as much as you can. Avoid temptation. Make sure that the temptation is away from your universe, away from your environment, if at all possible, especially if trigger is definitely going to be a problem. Be intentional about developing your community and your spirituality. So the people that you keep around you, the company you keep, you are a product of. So you keep good people around you, keep people that are strong, that are wise. You can learn a lot and you can get a lot from that. And you'll be able to give them a lot too. Working the steps and mechanisms. That's very much a thing. Whether we're talking about the traditional 12 steps or we're talking about the components of smart recovery, yeah, you definitely have to work through this. Surface. In the sense that a month afterwards, I'm able to talk about what's going on and I'm sharing it with you. Given eCam and restream problems, I wish it was live, but I'm absolutely recording this and it's being posted tonight. Being recovery focused and not prohibition focused. So the focus is on recovery, but not necessarily prohibition. There are people that don't have a problem, and it's not our point in life to say, oh, you're drinking, that's no good, or oh, you're gambling, that's no good. That's on them. That's their choice. But for us, we're about recovery. So we're recovery focused. Learn from those who are in this boat, especially for a long time. The long timers, the old timers, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, have a lot of wisdom to give all of us, especially someone like me who, for lack of better terms, have only been clean for about 3.5 years with respect to the food, and sober for about 3+ years. And with the gambling, well, you know that story, 2+ years with a relapse in the middle. And remember, again, no one is immune from a slip. No one. No one's immune from it. But that doesn't mean that when it happens, it's a bad thing. We need to really realize that in recovery, this may happen. As long as we have a plan, we can move forward. Just a few more things to think about. This is an opportunity for us to grow. This is an opportunity for us to grow inside, to become smarter, to become healthier. We explore new hobbies. We reconnect with old ones. Whether it's a question of fishing or hiking or what have you, exploring new hobbies and reconnecting with old ones is definitely part of something that we could do for ourselves that we don't need anybody else for. We just need us. And that's the best kind of therapy, is do things that only rely on you. If we could do that, that's huge. Make use of a journal and use it. It is by you, for you. I am a big user of day one. I've been putting entries in for the last 3 years, and I continue to do so. Sometimes video entries, sometimes audio entries, sometimes prose, sometimes poetry, sometimes a caption. But I make use of day one each and every day. The next thing that I've been a big believer in, especially in the last 2 years, is getting your body moving. Exercise the body. You've exercised your mind, but if you can exercise your body, well, you have a stronger mind-body connection for sure. So the body needs to move. And if you can keep yourself physically fit, there's chances are that you could probably keep yourself mentally fit as well. And lastly, and most important, don't be afraid to ask for help. For the people that came to help me in the last month or so, I'm very thankful for you. I don't know where I'd be without that. I don't know where I'd be without me having an admission of what happened. But thank you for listening, and thank you for guiding me through this. And also, thank you for various people that helped me out with this relapse prevention plan in the first place. I am very appreciative for all of you. And, the thing is, we learn a lot from that. And I hope to teach as much as I can about this. I'll say a couple of things before we talk about one more entry of language letting go. I'm thankful that this is a pre-recorded episode, but I'm also sad it's not live, and I definitely am interested in your comments. So by all means, if you have any comments about what we discussed, don't hesitate to email me. I'm at theventureforward@gmail.com. You can also leave comments within this video, and I will address each and every one of them. Let's do one more entry from Language Letting Go. Language Letting Go from a couple days ago. If this is not poignant, I don't know what is. Being gentle with ourselves. During times of grief, the process of adapting to change and loss takes energy. Grief is draining, sometimes exhausting. Some people need to cocoon for transformation, in Pat Carnes' words, while going through grief. We may feel more tired than usual. Our ability to function well in other areas of our life may be reduced, at least temporarily. We may want to hide out in the safety of our bedroom. Grief is heavy. It can wear us down. It's okay to be gentle with ourselves when we're going through change and grief. Yes, we want to maintain the disciplines of recovery, but we can be compassionate with ourselves. We do not have to expect more from ourselves than we can deliver during this time. We do not even have to expect as much from ourselves as we normally would and reasonably expect. We absolutely may need some rest, more sleep, some more comfort, some TLC, if you will. We may be more needy and have less ability to give. It is okay to accept ourselves and our changed needs during times of grief, stress, and change. It is okay to allow ourselves to cocoon during times of transformation. We can surrender to the process and trust that a new, exciting energy is being created within us. Before long, we will take wings and fly. God, help me accept my change needs during times of grief, change, and loss. And that is the language of letting go. When I think of taking wings and flying, I think of what my spirit animal is. And you can tell what my spirit animal is because it's been the logo of this show for the last 3 years. It's a phoenix. Phoenixes rise. Phoenixes rise and try to rise through what weighed them down previously. And they become stronger. And then they help everybody that the phoenix can absolutely help. And I hope what I'm doing with this show, with my book that I'm about to release soon, within the next 2 or 3 months, will help a lot of people. I'm giving a talk about the weight loss and the mind-body connection within the next couple months. And I'm looking forward to touching more people with that story, with what I did over the last 3.5 years to get myself to a healthier place, but realizing that it starts up here every single time. We have to figure out why we basically do the things we did, why we were looking for that dopamine drip, or we were looking for those sort of things to comfort us. If we can identify that and try to change our behaviors and change our environment, not to deal with that anymore, well, that's the best thing we could do, or at least come up with strategies to work through it. So that is basically what this topic was about, is recovery. And thank you for letting me talk about my relapse that happened back earlier in September. On that point, I'm glad to say, and I'm hoping everything works tomorrow, we will do what we normally do on Friday nights and have an episode of VF Talks at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific with Matt Haas, Paul Burke, and all of you. Given the last couple weeks, I'm really looking forward to tomorrow's talk, VF Talks rather. I'm also looking forward to telling you what happened during the marathon and how I completed my first marathon. So I'm looking forward to that. And then 1 week from tonight, maybe live, maybe taped, I don't know. It depends on a couple things. We're going to talk about diet and exercise again, because in light of everything, we should revisit that. And it's more than just a conversation about the Harris-Benedict formula and intermittent fasting. We're talking about how important it is in very different areas of our life. So we're going to talk about diet and exercise 1 week from tonight. That'll be next Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, right here on the Venture Forward. But until next time, I'm going to say the same thing I say at the end of every Venture Forward in VF Talks. Stay safe, stay sane, stay strong, stay sober. You're worth it. Have a wonderful night. We'll see you tomorrow night for VF Talks at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific, right here on the Venture Forward. Have a wonderful night. I love you all, and fly, be free.